Elliot Grayson had mastered the art of appearing humane. He wore compassion like a tailored suit, immaculate, expensive, and carefully constructed. On magazine covers, he was the smiling pharmaceutical visionary who spoke of relieving suffering. At charity galas, he pledged millions to hospitals, addiction awareness programs, and public health initiatives. Cameras adored him, politicians praised him, investors worshipped him. Behind closed doors, Elliot Grayson counted profits earned from a painkiller so addictive it rewrote lives into ruins. The drug was called Neurovex, marketed as a breakthrough, a miracle for chronic pain patients. Doctors were encouraged to prescribe it liberally. Sales representatives were trained to minimize addiction risks. Internal reports, buried deep within encrypted databases, showed rising dependency, overdoses, and deaths. Elliot had read every one of them, and signed off anyway. To Elliot, suffering was a statistic. Addiction was a market behavior. Deaths were collateral noise in a system that rewarded growth. The company's valuation soared, and so did his influence. When lawsuits emerged, settlements were cheaper than reform. When activists protested, donations silenced them. When families cried, public relations buried their voices under press releases and philanthropic headlines. For years, the illusion held, until Jonah Hale logged in. Jonah was not supposed to be dangerous. On paper, he was invisible, a mid-level data analyst contracted to clean historical datasets for regulatory compliance. Quiet, efficient, recovering addict. His resume mentioned personal insight into substance dependency, a line HR had found endearing and harmless. They never asked what that meant. Jonah had once swallowed pills like prayers. Neurovex had entered his life after a workplace injury, prescribed by a doctor who trusted glossy pamphlets and false assurances. Within months, Jonah lost his job. Within a year, his marriage. Within 2, his sense of self. Rehab saved his body, but memory saved the rage. When Jonah opened the raw datasets, unfiltered, unmassaged, he recognized patterns no algorithm needed to reveal. Prescription spikes followed by ER admissions. Regional sales surges mirrored overdose clusters. Internal warnings suppressed, rewritten, delayed. This wasn't negligence. It was design. Jonah worked at night, tracing buried files, deleted emails, executive approvals. Elliot Grayson's name appeared again and again, not as a distant figurehead, but as an active architect. Notes dismissing addiction concerns, instructions to reframe mortality narratives, budget approvals diverting safety research funds into marketing. Jonah didn't leak the data immediately. He studied it, understood it. Then he made it undeniable. When the exposé broke, it detonated like a fault line snapping. Headlines screamed betrayal. Senate hearings followed. Share prices collapsed. Charities returned donations. The public learned that the benevolent executive funding addiction recovery had built his empire by fueling addiction itself. Elliot Grayson watched the world turn hostile from the glass walls of his office. For the first time in his life, money did not protect him. But prison never came. Too many politicians owed him favors. Too many institutions feared exposure. The legal system compromised, as it often did when power was involved. Instead of incarceration, Elliot was sentenced to something unprecedented, something no lawyer could spin into a victory. He was stripped of executive authority, his assets were frozen, and he was placed under court-mandated oversight to personally operate and fund rehabilitation centers across the regions most devastated by Neurovex. Not as a donor, as a presence. He would meet families, hear testimonies, sit in group sessions. No press, no cameras, no branding. Every decision reviewed, every interaction recorded. The sentence was meant to humiliate him. Elliot believed he could endure it. At first, he treated it like any other business turnaround. Facilities were underfunded, understaffed, inefficient. He optimized budgets, improved logistics, installed metrics. Patients became numbers again: recovery rates, relapse percentages, operational costs. Then the meetings began. A mother placed a photograph in front of him, her son at age 8, missing 2 teeth, smiling without fear. "This was before Neurovex," she said calmly. "He died at 26. A former construction worker described waking up every morning shaking, stealing from his own children to avoid withdrawal. "I didn't want to be a thief. I just wanted the pain to stop." A nurse spoke of watching overdose victims arrive in waves. She called it the Neurovex hour, same time, every night. Elliot listened. At first, he defended himself internally. He didn't force anyone to take the drug. Doctors prescribed it. Patients chose it. The system was complex. But complexity did not resurrect the dead. Jonah Hale attended these sessions, not as an observer, but as a survivor. He never spoke to Elliot directly at first. He didn't need to. His presence was accusation enough. One afternoon, during a closed group meeting, Jonah finally looked at him. "You don't recognize me, but I recognize you. Every time I swallowed a pill, I trusted your signature more than my own instincts." Elliot said nothing. "You funded a rehab center once. Do you know what that bought you? Silence, gratitude, and more addicts." That night, Elliot couldn't sleep. For the first time, his mind didn't replay stock charts or negotiations. It replayed voices, faces, names. The word profit began to feel obscene. Weeks passed, then months. Elliot began to stay longer at the centers, not because he was required to, but because leaving felt worse. He listened more, spoke less. Numbers lost meaning. Stories gained weight. One evening, a young woman relapsed and overdosed after 6 months of sobriety. She survived, but barely. Elliot sat outside the hospital room, hands shaking, realizing that this time the consequences had a face he knew. He asked Jonah why he hadn't sold the data anonymously and disappeared. Jonah answered simply, "Because I wanted you to see us, not as losses, as people." Elliot understood then that prison would have been easier. Years later, his name meant nothing in finance. He lived modestly, quietly, still running rehabilitation centers, no longer by mandate, but by choice. He attended funerals, celebrated recoveries, carried grief that could not be diversified or hidden. Jonah moved on, eventually. He built systems to detect pharmaceutical abuse patterns early. He trained analysts who understood that data had blood on it. They never became friends, but once, during a group session, Elliot said something that surprised everyone, including himself. "There is no amount of good that can erase what I did, only work that never ends." No one applauded. And that, Elliot finally understood, was justice.